Hi, everybody. Welcome to Oregon Legacy. My name is George Carrillo. Today, I've got a wonderful guest, Senator Elizabeth Steiner. We're going to be having a little fireside chat here for the next 15 minutes to talk and learn a little bit more about the senator. She is running for state treasurer, and we want to get to know her today just as a person. We're not going to focus too much on policy. We're going to try to make this really lighthearted. So let me bring in our guest. Senator, thank you so much for being here with us today.
It's a pleasure. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the debate. What did you think of the debate?
You know, I really appreciated the opportunity to dig into some issues and actually have some counterpoint going on, because so many of these forums, we just have to answer the same question and we don't really get a chance to respond to what the other person's saying. And I think debates are really important for voters to see how we respond to the points the other person's making and how we conduct ourselves as well. Hopefully I came across as professional, I tried to, but also to call out my opponent and perhaps for him to call me out on things that we don't think are accurate or inconsistent with what we said before.
Did you have fun though?
Was it yeah. Oh, I loved it. I loved it. I thought it was great. I love that. I love a good debate.
I thought it was good because of it wasn't until like a little bit later in the debate where the two of you started kind of going back and forth. And
yeah,
for me as the moderator, I loved it because I started to see the differences between the two candidates. And I think that's what's helpful for voters to be able to understand what's the difference between the two of you. Your views are close, but there's a lot of things that aren't too aligned.
Yeah, exactly.
So tell me.
I appreciate it. And you did a great job moderating. I know I'm not just saying that, I promise. You did a really good job. So often you see moderators who don't take their job seriously, aren't well prepared, and don't take an even hand in the debate. And you did all of those things well.
I'd like to learn a little bit more about your journey of becoming a doctor. Was that always a dream when you're a child that you grew up?
Yeah.
I want to be a doctor, or what did that look like?
I am one of those people who decided at a very young age. Family legend has it that I was 4 when I decided I wanted to be a doctor. And, there were a few little detours along the way about being an astronaut, because who doesn't want to be an astronaut, right? But then I decided, well, I could do space medicine. That wasn't quite what happened, but no, I decided when I was 4, and I walked in the door of our local hospital the day I turned 14 so I could be a candy striper, and put in hundreds of hours throughout high school, and went off to college and did all my pre-med stuff in addition to actually got my degree in a social science, and then worked for a couple of years because I thought it was really important for a doctor to have the experience of being completely dependent on a working income, an hourly wage, because that gives you a lot more empathy for the people you're working with. And if you've only ever been in school and then you become a physician, I think it's a little harder to understand sometimes what your patients are experiencing.
So what was that college experience like for you? I mean, that is a heavy workload. I mean, you're in school for a long time. I could only imagine what your student debt looked like. But I know for the doctors that I've spoken to, their journey along college, some take a little bit longer. Some said, I actually enjoyed college and I partied, and it took me a little bit longer. And some were like, hey, I was just devoted 7 years and, I didn't do anything but eat, breathe my books. And so what was that like for you?
I'm more in the latter category, and I kind of wish I hadn't been. I did a lot of AP classes in high school, had a lot of AP credits coming into college, and graduated in just over 3 years. And somehow I just always wanted to accelerate my life, and I kind of wish I hadn't, right? I kind of wish that I had taken a little more time to stop and smell the metaphorical roses and take some classes that weren't directly related to either my major or pre-med. But it's water under the bridge, and all I can do is advise other people to maybe take a different path. But I was glad, as I said, that I took the time to work for a couple of years. It helped me save some money, and it helped me have a different kind of working experience, and it helped reconfirm. I was working as a medical assistant in an ophthalmology practice, so it helped reconfirm that I did, in fact, want to go to medical school and that it was the right path to pursue. And I got super lucky. I'm from Massachusetts originally, and I was able to go to UMass for medical school. And at that time, the cost was relatively low, and they had a really good loan forgiveness program. So I actually came out of college and medical school with relatively little debt. Of course, I'm also ancient. Well, not really. I'm 61. So I went through all this a long time ago, and it's a little different now than it was then.
Did you own your own practice, or did you work for somebody? What did that look like for you?
I joined a private practice and became a partner there after a year over in Vancouver, Washington, right across the river. We had offices in Vancouver, and then I helped open a new office out in Camas, and that was really great because it was a small practice. And then I actually became medical director of the entire practice 2 years out, which was kind of crazy. And a year after having my first baby. So I was a little busy. But I really enjoyed it, and it helped me get some managerial experience and some organizational experience. And all at the same time, I was always teaching. I've always been on clinical faculty at OHSU, even when I wasn't on regular faculty. So I always had medical students in my practice with me learning about what it's like to be a practicing family physician. So it was a great, well-rounded experience. And then at some point I was excited to go back to OHSU and be full-time faculty there.
I had an opportunity to hear you speak yesterday at the Voters Forum, and I love how you started your speech. You said, first things first is you're a mother, and I really love that. And I know that you have children. What was that journey like? You have been a doctor, your state senator, your mother, your children. I mean, balancing all of that. How did you do it?
Okay, so there is no such thing as balance, just to be crystal clear. It's kind of more of a teeter-totter, right? Sometimes you go one way and sometimes you go to the other. But, I was fortunate enough that when I got married, I gained a kid instantly, and that was great. And I'm still super close with her, although I'm not married to her father anymore. And then had 2 more children. And I was fortunate that their father was willing to stay home full-time with them. I mean, eventually he worked, but when they were infants, he was home with them full-time. I never worked full-time after my kids were born. I worked, more accurately, I worked full-time according to normal people hours, because I was probably working 40 or 50 hours a week, but I wasn't working 60 or 70 hours a week, which is full-time for a family physician who does maternity care. So there've definitely been times when I had to make some tough choices between work obligations of one kind or another and things I wanted to do with my kids. But I guess the fact that all my kids live within 10 minutes of me now means I did something right. And they all still want to hang out with me. So that's a good thing.
The pandemic, for me, changed my life.
I'm sure. Did for all of us, I think.
Yeah. And, it was interesting to see how we didn't know any different. We worked. We're, traveling back and forth. When I worked at the state, it was like an hour and some change just to get there, and then an hour and some change to get back.
Yep.
You were constantly working. And then all of a sudden the world stopped one day. I'll never forget that day. It's like, I got a text message at 10:30 at night. My wife and I were looking at a text message. It's like, what do you mean schools are closed indefinitely?
Yeah, I know.
All of a sudden we became homeschool teachers. We became, their religious guidance counselors. We became their best friends. I mean, we were always close, but this was a new norm. And now that we've kind of gone back to normal, in society, but not everything's gone back to normal. I still appreciate the opportunity to remote and do all those. And so that family bondness is very much vocalized, that they want to keep that.
That's great. That's really good. That's a gift. The pandemic did have some silver linings, the ability to do remote work, the ability in the legislature. I helped pass legislation to require that everything that qualifies as a public meeting in the state allow for remote testimony. That was a rarity before the pandemic because everybody thought it was complicated or whatever. And it became clear that it was not complicated. And as a matter of respect for working Oregonians and people who live a long way away for us from the state capitol, but really from anywhere, if you're a family, you're a mom and a family with school-age kids, and there's an evening meeting, a school board meeting or something that you want to participate in, to ask you to take 3 hours to drive half an hour to get to the meeting, be there for an hour and a half, testify for a minute and a half, and drive half an hour home, that's not very respectful. But if we want to say, okay, you can stay home with your kids, you can feed them dinner, you can watch the meeting online, and then when it's your turn, you can testify, and then go back to being with your family, that's much more family-centered and much more respectful, and it makes it more possible for everyday Oregonians to have their voices heard in a whole bunch of contexts.
It's interesting to look back. I remember when I joined state service, I was a manager at the Department of Human Services, and I remember seeing families come in for help, whether it was for cash assistance or food benefits, and they would come to great lengths, with their children in tow.
Yep.
They're fitting in our family coach's really small cubicles, and it was,
Yeah.
and they would be there almost all day trying to get
ridiculous.
help. And it was really ridiculous. And I remember going through that process of trying to work with the upper echelon of the organization to say, there's a better way to do this.
Yes.
And remote work was just such a taboo sort of topic. And it was always that it's not possible, all of these things. And then all of a sudden the day stopped when,
Yep.
The world stopped.
Yep.
And then the very next day we were in a remote world.
Yep.
So I find it interesting when we need to, we can, but
Yes.
when we don't need to, we don't see the benefit or the opportunity.
I agree completely. And that's why that's what I mean by a silver lining, right? You have that family closeness that has persisted to this day because you and your wife handled it so well. And we have opportunities now for people to engage in either remote work themselves or remote participation in public process or any number of things like that. I think that's a great thing. Even you and me being able to do this kind of fireside chat without having to find a studio where we can record it and we can both be in the same place at the same time. I'm sitting in my home office and you are too, and there we go, right?
Exactly. So my last question for you is, what did that look like for you when the pandemic happened and we were all on alert and everything?
Oh my gosh.
What did that look like for you, especially as a physician?
Well, I had been in the legislature 8 years by then, and I was in my second year as co-chair of the budget committee. And I had for a long time been practicing just doing urgent care in the interims between legislative session. So I had stopped right before the 2020 session, and two things happened. The first was the pandemic, obviously, and the second was the Republican senators walked out and never came back. So we had a failed legislative session, which meant that we couldn't rebalance the budget. And the combination of that plus the economy shutting down meant that our budget was just a nightmare, to use a polite word. And I was talking actually about this with Representative Rayfield last night because he was my House counterpart. And we were literally looking at budgets for, okay, you have a $17,000 travel budget. Now that's gone, right? Oh, you're buying colored paper clips instead of the basic basic metal ones? Nope, back to basic metal ones. I mean, we were down to that level of budget detail to try to consolidate it and cut budgets without affecting the people that we were trying to serve who desperately needed all of these services. Plus, my team, was just overwhelmed with unemployment claims, and there were all the problems that everybody remembers with the unemployment system. So we were flat out and doing it all by trying to figure out all this remote stuff, right? It was all new. And it was quite a time. It was quite a time. We got through it. The economy, we came back, thank God, and we didn't have to slash program too much. But wow. I haven't been back to practice actually since then. I've been working. Anybody who claims that being a legislator is a part-time job hasn't been one. And although I have many colleagues who are able to hold down other jobs, I would say that as co-chair of Wages and Means, it's hard, not impossible. Representative Sanchez is doing a really good job of it. But even in the interim, I'm working 20, 30 hours a week at least as a legislator.
Well, Senator, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's been great to have the opportunity to learn more about you, to see how you were able to navigate through all these difficult moments within your life and everything that we all shared in commonality through the pandemic. So thank you so much for being here with us. I'd love to give you a second here to have any closing comments.
Thanks so much, George. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk more with folks who are listening. It's always great to have more opportunities to connect with Oregonians across the entire state. It's one of the things I really love about my work. And I love having an interview that doesn't focus on primarily on my work as senator or on my treasurer race. So thanks for asking some questions that haven't been asked for a while. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you again, Senator, and everybody who's watching. Thank you so much for watching this fireside chat with Senator Elizabeth Steiner. Please remember to vote. Voting is happening currently right now here in the state of Oregon. You have till May 21st. And so good luck to everybody. Have a wonderful weekend. And remember, get those ballots in. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.